Robert Gooch, British Free Range Egg Producers Association. Neil and Angela, I see that you've had a lot of correspondence with the Secretary of State about the lack of or the detail of the scenarios for the impact analyses for different sectors in the past. I believe you've got sight of a broader economic analysis for the whole economy, but we're not allowed to see that. And so my question to you is that true, and what do you think about it? Secondly, do you think there is a detailed economic impact analysis for agriculture sitting in some Whitehall shelf? And thirdly, perhaps why didn't you do that as part of your report, as no one else seems to be doing one? Thanks.
Right. Okay. Do you want to do those two?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as far as horticulture is concerned, we did take evidence. I don't think DEFRA does give horticulture enough of a say. And I think Andrew and I agree entirely on this, because we've been to sort of various dinners with horticulture. So it's not only like your vegetables, your fruit, it's also about ornamental shrubs and flowers and all sorts. I mean, trees, there's everything there that we can do more of. And I think you're absolutely right when it's export substitution is where I think there's a big driving for horticulture. And I think what I will promise you to do, and Angela will hold me to it, is that as we look at the agriculture bill as it comes through, if there's not enough in it on horticulture, then we'll make sure there is in our report when we analyse it. And then as far as, yes, as the impact assessments, there are some, but they're not detailed. And so we have got a certain amount of access to it as MPs. We will be, as I said to you, we are now meeting with the Permanent Secretary, Claire Moriarty. And this is what Andrew and I can take it hot from this meeting, really, is the importance to have this sector by sector proper analysis. And it needs to be done now. I mean, there's been the AHDB has done quite a lot on the meat side. There's been various organisations have been doing bits and pieces and good work as well. But I think it's having that structure in place. And I said earlier, there's quite a lot more. I think something like 600 or 700 extra staff in DEFRA, so it'd be quite nice to know what they're doing, are part of these staff actually looking directly at the impact assessments? I would hope they are, but that's the sort of detailed questions we're going to ask. So, and like the trouble we've got with all reports we do, and we've got very good team, like I said, with Elliot and Amwin here, and we've got 8 or 10 altogether, is it? No,
only 5, Chairman.
Only 5.
Bless you for thinking we count.
Yeah,
as 2,
seems like more like 10. But
yes.
It's having enough people to do the work that we do. But like I said, we are more than happy to try and take on some of this. And of course, don't forget, the NFU here, all your professional staff provide us with some really good stuff as well. I know I would say that because I'm sitting at the NFU table, but seriously, it's from the CLA, it's from all the Sheep Association, all these people that are out there. And from poultry, pigs, everything is to try and get as much information as we can. And I think your question is, is DEFRA collating it? Have they got an impact assessment on each sector? And that's what we need to find out, basically.
Okay. Charles at the back, and then we've got a question up at the front. Lots of hands still going up. So,
all I was going to say, Neil, we roughly know where we're going to be, don't we, when we come to March the 29th, 2019, because we're going to absorb all their rules into our legislation. They'll still have all those rules, so we're all level. We're a level playing field there. So I don't see we'll fall out with them there. What I believe then is we'll probably drift apart, and you're probably right. In 5-10 years' time, we'll be different, but we'll still have to have their rules when we're trading. Because I believe when you look at negotiations, David Davis is now talking about everybody's drifting together, and I think by the time we get there, the one thing that I would say is our sticking point, I believe, is going to be money. I think the EU will be looking for money. I went to a conference where the finance commissioner spoke, And our cost, their loss of income to the Common Agriculture Policy by us pulling out is 14 billion euros. And I think that's where we'll be falling out with them. Not on the rules, not on the trade, not all the other things, but over the money they're going to charge us to stay with those rules.
Right.
So I don't know whether you agree. And the other thing I will just say to you is that the chicken that come from America, even though they've been washed with chlorine, still have a damn sight more bugs on than mine do, which aren't washed with chlorine. Thank you.
I knew that, Charles, for a fact.
I mean, on that point on regulation, we'll come to the second question in a minute, but you made a very good point, I thought, in the report about regulatory alignment, where you quoted the Institute for Government, who said there's a difference between having the same rules and having those rules legally recognised as being the same as the EU's. And I think it's another thing we need to bear in mind. Just because we have the same rules at the moment, if the EU doesn't recognise that we have those, then that's when you start getting friction and extra burdens, because even if you're abiding by those rules, the EU will need to satisfy themselves that you're doing that and come and check. So it's an important point. Sometimes
it's like a divorce. You see, it's all right until the lawyers get involved. And I'm being absolutely serious now, because there'll be lawyers on both sides that'll look at everything. And Charles makes a really interesting point. If you are right, Charles, and it is about money, we can settle it. Because if it is about money, there'll be a negotiation in the end. And if we are, if they in the end we say, right, okay, that's the money we want. If we walk away, you don't get any of that money, then a deal can be had. It'll be an interesting one. But, if you're right in that, I think a deal will be got. Because, you see, don't forget, if we pull out, it leaves the Germans then as the total, virtually the total, not completely the total paymaster general of Europe, and they will want to share some of that responsibility. And so that's why I think that a deal can be done, because the money, yes, it's sticking, and yes, you see, the other issue will be, Charles, on the money is that, if we pay enough, we probably get a deal. For half of our population, it'll be too much if we pay them a penny, and that is the other sticking point politically, because we're not buying a farm or selling a house. We're not. It's not a private negotiation. You've got all political opinion and politics and everything mixed in. It's the worst time and place to do a deal, but a deal needs to be done. Yeah, go on.
Quickly, Charles.
We will honour our agreement.
Yeah.
But we have to pay Neil Pinnock and Dennis pensions until they die and all these sort of things. So the money that we pay will only be to be dressed up to actually honouring the agreement, as the Prime Minister always said we'll do.
Thank you, Charles.
I mean, I think we do have to honour our agreements that we've had in place, but what we don't want to be doing is charge too much money for future EU expenditure, and I think that's what the argument will be down to in the end.
Right, we've got about 15 minutes or so for continued questions. So, are you going to have to?
I have to go.
So
you've got to go and catch your train, have
I've
you?
got to catch a train.
Yeah,
I'm really
I'm sure
sorry.
Neil's got answers enough for both of you in the meantime.
I like to have somebody to have a debate with. You see,
I know,
that's right.
exactly.
Yeah. So thank you, Angela. Thank you, Angela, very much. Thank you.
I'm really sorry to have to go, actually. Yeah, thank you.
Rose Richards, NFU Dairy Advisor. Two quick questions. One of the recommendations of the EFRA report was bringing in production labelling. I know this is something Compassion and Wool Farming have pushed for, but how would this look for the dairy industry? It's something members have already expressed concerns about, particularly with the debate over graze versus indoor systems and consumer misconceptions about welfare and environmental standards. And secondly, with the UK's sheep food policy, should we be focusing on consuming more lower value British products or accessing higher value markets elsewhere?
Interesting one. Yeah. Is there another one?
Yes, Carl.
Carl Schneider, Farmers Weekly. In your report, you call for funding for farmers to help them through the transition period and to help them prepare for the post-Brexit world. Can you say a bit more about what you'd like to see that money spent on? And are you getting a feel that the door's ajar or open on that, or is that going to be a tough one?
Right. Okay. As far as the sort of type of production labelling, yes, I think there is this is one where we have to be careful, because I think there is an argument that there'll be part of the population that likes grass-fed beef, grass-fed lamb, grass-fed milk production, and cows grazed in the field, and I think that's a lot of what the public like to see. But counter to that, of course, you've still got very good animal welfare standards in large production that may be zero grazed. So it's getting the sort of type of production and the quality right. But I think certainly that's a political, or not a party political, but it's a political move of where I believe the country to be. Now, what was the second part of your question?
The second question was about the UK's cheap food policy, and should we be focusing on lower value products here or accessing higher value markets elsewhere?
Well, I mean, the simple answer is both, because my view is that I've got a sort of very old-fashioned view of economics, and that is that if you've got a dairy market, you get as much of your home market as you can, and then you export as much as you can. You keep the market tight, and you get a good price. The moment you've got too much milk and not enough market, that's when you get your low price. And so I think it is a combination of both, because I still think our consumers want to have a good product. I don't say it should be low priced, but I think it should be a reasonable price, home market, and then the higher end. It's like you've got tourist businesses and people out there who can sell to the tourists and can mark up their food and get a really good price. That takes a certain percentage of the market each time. It's not the be all and end all. It doesn't. Still 90% of the food will go through the major processors and retailers. But every time you take a percentage, so if you take another percentage or two of milk, turn it into high-value yogurts or cheeses or whatever, and you export it to China, you take another 2 or 3% out of the total market. Because in the end, it's only those last few percentage points that are either you've got overproduction or underproduction that makes the difference between a good price and a bad one. So I think it very much is a case of doing that. And I think your question really is, it is partly on research and development, it's partly on we're trying to tease out, because George Eustace has been talking a lot about how we create a productive farming in the future. So will it be more grants towards buildings? Will it, when we talk about the environment, a lot of slurry stores have already been covered, but do we want to cover more of that? Do we actually want to sort of help farmers be competitive by giving them help to actually alter their farming practices as well? So it's a combination of all those things. I mean, in the future, and this is probably controversial even in this room, do we need to look towards sort of biotechnology and GM and all those things? But of course we could have a big debate in this room alone on it, let alone in the population. But I mean, there could be an argument in the future with blight-resistant potatoes and others that there could be a benefit to actually using some GM technology. But I better not open that debate up, because we'll be here all
We'll have to have
day.
another breakout session.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right, I've got 3 questions down in the corner here. Yes.
Just very quickly, Phil Allen from the Southwest. Sorry to bring up this subject, and probably many of you will groan when I mention the word TB, but seeing as the NFU has put 10 million in this project up to now, I do appreciate all your contributions, and that's why I'm going to ask this question. Neil, we talk about high animal welfare status in this country as if it's a given. The one thing we haven't got high status on is our TB position. Does that present us a risk? And does that present us a risk that may make some of these discussions academic?
Thank you.
Right.
Alex, and then if you pass it as well.
Alex Waugh, I'm from the Flour... Excuse me. From the Flour Millers Association. Neil, in your report, there's a brief section on Northern Ireland, mostly to do with cross-border trade in animals and so on. Ireland's our biggest market for flour. We supply 80% of the flour they consume there. And I'm interested in your views on the fail-safe agreement that effectively says if we don't reach an agreement with Ireland, then we're going to keep everything the same and we'll make sure the rules are the same so we can carry on more or less in a customs union. Does that mean that there's kind of an incentive on the other side not to reach an agreement, because then we'll end up with a customs agreement, which is what they want anyway?
Right, okay.
Well, one more. We'll just
Yeah,
take a
one
third
more.
one now because
Yeah.
we've got the microphone there.
Philip Wilkinson from the British poultry industry. I chair the export group. I'm also vice president of the European Poultry Association. Firstly, I'll just make a comment with regard to my colleague from the CLA behind, with regard to German cars and them finding an alternative arrangement. Can I just say they're spending a lot of time in Brussels. I think that deal is virtually being done with Mercosur. Sandro Galliano has done the deal where cars will be traded for more food coming in from Mercosur into the EU. And just to put it into perspective as to how food is held in terms of esteem there, Commissioner Hogan wasn't even involved in those discussions. So I think that is a deal that is partly going to bridge that gap. The second point that I want to make, Chairman, is this, and it's with regard to the help that governments can give in terms of export. We export in our business over £63 million worth of products a year. A lot of that going into South Africa. In the campaign for Brexit, it was suggested that a lot of the third world countries, the developing countries, will be the market, and I totally agree with that. We've already started to make inroads there, and at any one time we've got 45 containers of chicken on the ocean going to Durban, South Africa. Only in recent weeks, and I've shared this with you and written to the Secretary of State, they have slapped a 37% tariff on safeguarding product going into South Africa. That's 37 on top of a 23% anti-dumping tariff. Nobody is out there, Neil, with open arms saying, where have you been all our lives? Send us loads of it and we'll pay you shed loads of money for it. We need the sort of help that you alluded to with the Dutch, with people out there in China, in South Africa, in Pretoria, helping us. We've got operations in Holland. They help us. They really do. And the same in Poland. We need that sort of support. We will rise to the challenge. We will export the product, but we need as much help in return.
Great, right,
Thank you.
okay.
So you got
Right.
TB Ireland.
TB, I mean, I think the straight answer to you on TB is yes, if we don't sort it, it could come an issue, because don't forget, I went to the European Parliament in 1999. I marched down the Champs-Élysées telling them to eat British beef, because even under single market rules, the French were still not allowing British beef in. So, you know, we've got to get our disease under control, and that's why, you know, I really welcome what the Secretary of State has now said on TB, because I was a bit worried where he was going on it. But I think, you know, he realises we need to keep those culls going, do it, you know, in a very welfare friendly way, but actually sort this situation out, which needs dealing with. So I think we must get our disease under control. So it is an issue that we and I think, provided we are seen to be getting on top of it, seen to be actually really focusing on it, then I don't think it becomes a trade issue. If we were to take our eye off the ball on it, then I think it could become a trade issue. So we need to get it sorted and keep going. Northern Ireland, you see, I think the politics of Northern Ireland is that I think it's an issue where I think will help us get a deal overall with the EU and Great Britain. I don't think you can have a different deal in Ireland than you can in the rest of the United Kingdom, because Northern Ireland will never accept it, you see. The point I was making was that I think, do the EU, you know, America will be watching on this as well, because they won't want, you know, further troubles in Northern Ireland, so and in Ireland, and so there's a lot of politics that on security and on the history of Ireland that focuses, you know, not only Britain, the EU, but also America. And so I think this is where there will be huge political force saying, for God's sake, don't create a hard border between the North and South. And so that's why I think it'll help us get a deal overall. But do I think it's going to be a different deal in Northern Ireland and the Republic? No, I don't actually. But I think, you know, it'll help us get a deal for overall with the EU. And then, yes, I think, you know, you couldn't hit the nail more on the head. There's no, you know, I always say that, you know, there's trade deals that can be had out there, but we want a good trade deal, but so do they. And so they're always looking to get that good trade deal. So if we're going to get these good trade deals that are good for us, we've got to up our game. We've got to have the people over there, and we've got to make sure, all of our vets, everybody, all of our systems in place for licensing the export. Not only have we got to get the market, when the Chinese or others come to inspect our slaughterhouses, all of those things, because as you know, they do it all, and they go into a huge amount of detail. And yes, you can get food into China, but my God, can't they be difficult in the process? Let's open our eyes and say, yes, we can get these deals, but we have got to fight for them, and we've got to fight with, the Europeans, Denmark and Holland in particular, and Germany and France are all doing very, very good deals now. So like I said, I'm not saying we can't do them, but like I said, let's be absolutely sure that we got our eyes open and we go in there and fight our corner. And I was quite serious, and I know you said there's a job for the House of Lords, but I do actually think if you've got trade envoys in that can go, and build up a relationship in a country, and they don't change every 5 minutes because the cabinet's been reshuffled or whatever, I think that's the way you get trade deals, and I think that's what I think. I do want to keep the House of Lords well, and if I can finish off a few of them, it'll make space for me later on. You see, but no, I didn't say that, did I? But no, seriously, it's a case of making sure we've got somebody of status that can follow, because the developing countries and the Far East, they really respect the longevity of office, and in our Commons position, everybody gets recycled and changed very, very quickly, and I don't think they understand that.
Okay, Abby, and then there's one at the back on the right.
Abby Kay, Farmers Guardian.
Hello, Abby.
Hi. I'd be quite interested in an answer to Carl's question, actually, about the Brexit Adaptation Fund. But also, I'd like to know why Liam Fox didn't give evidence to your inquiry. I would have quite liked to see you hold his feet to the fire on things like the rollover of the EU's trade agreements with third countries and tariff rate quotas and whatnot.
Yeah, but I think it was in the end.
Take one more. There's the
yeah.
microphone's at the back. There we go.
We are planning to take.
Sorry.
We are planning to take over Fox's.
Yep.
Yeah.
Anthony Snell, soft fruit grower from Herefordshire, Horticultural Board. The aim of any committee is to debate and come to conclusions, but Angela has actually just left, but she says that the Prime Minister needs to say what she wants and give direction. But surely your role as a committee is to come to proper conclusions and and advise what's best for our the agricultural sector. And in this we've had a very interesting discussion here, but we haven't heard one sort of conclusion. So Neil, be very interested to hear what you think is the answer for British agriculture, and also in answer to Ali Kappa's horticultural question, you said that you talked about what we needed was export substitution. Surely you meant import substitution.
Yeah, import, sorry. Yeah. I beg your pardon on that one.
Okay.
Right. Yes, Abby, yours was you were asking. Just remind me, please. Yes, Liam Fox he is still down to come to the committee, so we haven't got him yet, but he's coming. So we don't know exactly when, do we?
No, he's suspiciously quiet.
Yes, that's right. Because funny enough, I went to a sort of private meeting with him where he was making much of the fact, he'd done a deal on the New Zealand lamb and splitting up the quotas, and then only to find that it was sort of being challenged by other members of the WTO. So, I think he does realise the necessity of a trade deal, especially on agriculture. And I think, you are right, and it'd be essential to actually get him before us to see where he sees that go. Because you see, the trouble is the rhetoric is very much, open up the trade. Trade is good, but not if it's going to undermine your own production. And I think that's where we want that reassurance. And I think that's what we'll be looking for Liam Fox to give us. So yes, that will be there. Do you want to ask me what Neil Parish's view on agriculture is? Because I can go on all afternoon.
We've got about 3 minutes
on that one. But no, I mean, what we did is we took each sector and we gave an analysis of exactly the effects of it. So I think our recommendation perhaps may not be quite as clear as you'd like, but really is that the access to the European market is essential. There is 60% of our food exports and imports are coming from that direction, and we need to retain access to that. But we didn't go down the route of saying it must be through the single market and the customs union. We gave the government the option of either going that route or actually having a bespoke agreement. But I think that the final point is it's easier for a select committee, and dare I say, and I would say this even if Angela was here, easier for the opposition to say, well, government must have this deal and they must have it today. Where I do accept, as a political party, there's far too many senior members of cabinet and across the party having too many individual ideas on where we want this deal to be. If we were more united, I think we've got better chance of getting that deal. But I still think we will get it. But it's not, I'd love to think it was my role, to dictate to the Prime Minister and the Cabinet exactly what sort of deal they've got to have. But I think that's well beyond my pay grade. But I can assure you that privately, there are many of us that are saying, for God's sake, stop all this squabbling and let's get on with it. Because I think then we've got a real chance of getting a deal. Because the trouble is, at the moment, we are seen as too divided, and that then is not good when you're negotiating. But is it easy to get everybody in the room together to agree it? No. But I still think we can achieve it. But farming always was and always will be. The coming out of the European Union was always going to affect agriculture. Because of the common agricultural policy, whether you loved or whether you hated it, it was always going to affect. Our trade policy was going to affect agriculture. This is what we're doing. We're going to, like I said, when we finish this one now, we are getting the white paper will come in on agriculture, first on fish and then on agriculture. We will then look at those. We will look at what the government's proposing. We will then look at payments. We will look at welfare, all of these things, environment, everything that's been talked about, today by the Secretary of State. All of that will be looked at, and then we will link that into what's happened, we believe, over trade. So, I think it was a logical thing to do, and I also say I appreciate a great audience I've had this afternoon, and also the fact that you asked some very good and searching questions. You've got some answers. You probably haven't got all of the answers.
I've got three more for you.
Right?
So
okay,
we've got literally 2 minutes. So if you can make them as quick as possible, Peter, Anthony, and we've got one.
Peter Gadd, cereal grower in the East Midlands. Neil, notwithstanding what you just said in your previous answer, and you almost alluded to it earlier on in the afternoon by talking about an interim deal. Do you feel there's an opportunity to try and overcome this potential impasse on Brexit Day by having some form of graduated transitional deal whereby all parties can work towards what they want to achieve, both Europe, over here in Britain, while still allowing us to go out into develop new deals around the rest of the world and also encompass some of the EU arrangements that we have at the moment?
Okay. Over here, and then... Yes,
Mr. Chairman, mine's just a comment. To be fair, Neil there is our MP for Tiverton. Over the past few years, he and I find it hard to pass compliments. Anyone who knows me, he's worked tirelessly for us. He's not only our MP, he's now become a friend of both mine and Sally's, and he spends an awful lot of time fighting on our cause. And like I said, I find it difficult to give compliments, but he's the best we got, I'll tell you that now. Thank you.
Final question, quickly, Anthony. Yeah.
Anthony Root. Yes, as a dairy producer, I supply a European co-op, Arla. You touched earlier on about how we could short our market to increase our value out of dairy products. How is being a member of a European co-op going to help me going forward, please?
I'll do it in reverse order. Arla, I see, is buying out Yo Valley, aren't they? Is that right? That's interesting, because that then means they've got, you know, an even bigger presence here in Britain. I mean, I think that Arla obviously have got confidence in the fact that they are going to be able to trade in Britain across Europe, aren't they? Otherwise they wouldn't be buying, in my view, Yo Valley Farms organics. And so therefore, I think I know we had Christensen in to see us, and he said, you know, during the milk crisis that you mustn't actually reduce production, you must increase it, because all you do is just allow more imports in if you decrease your production. It's an interesting argument. If everybody in the world does it, it doesn't necessarily work. But I can understand his argument. So I think Arla, and again we will, when we do the Ag Bill, Arla will be on the top of our list to come have them in, because I think they're very interesting, because the fact that they, you know, they've got, I think, something like 90% of Danish milk, 60% of Swedish milk. They're massive, aren't they, across the whole of the EU, and so, like I said, I think they are very interesting. So yeah, we'll be looking at that. But they've obviously got confidence. And then I'll do it in reverse order. Then Colin, I don't know, you know, it's difficult to answer that one, but all I know is that Colin is he's a great friend, and also he tells you how it is. So hopefully he might have got it right on this occasion. But seriously, I do my damnedest to have a go, and I am seen in Parliament. Well, that's that bastard parish on about farming again. But I think they have a reasonable amount of confidence. I might understand a little bit I'm talking about, so that's quite useful. And then on the final one on the deal, yeah, I think there's every chance there'll be an interim deal. But you raised the interesting point. I think the sticking point is, you see, if you have an interim deal, and at the same time you can negotiate deals with bringing in, you know, a trade deal, for argument's sake, with America. I suppose the interesting thing is if you were then bringing in food from America, processing it here, and then trying to send it into a European market. Now, I suspect that's not going to happen, for the simple reason that I think a trade deal with America may not be a million years away, but I don't think it's going to be in that interim period. And so I think what I'm hoping we will get to a stage that we'll be able to agree an interim deal with Europe. We'll be able to open up negotiations on trade deals with the rest of the world, and then we can sign those off as we leave that interim deal. I mean, that would be logical, wouldn't it? But I mean, politics and everything else, and Europe and Britain and Whitehall and the European Commission, perhaps logic is not always there, but you know, that's where we would like to be. So I am again an optimist. I think that's where we can get, but there'll have to be flexibility on both sides. And of course, the argument's been had today, you know, is there flexibility on the European side? Is there enough flexibility on our side? It's an interesting one, but I think in the end a deal must be done, because I think what people will want, won't they, is they'll want good quality food to very high standards on their being able to buy that. And I think they do actually want to buy British food. And I think that is a bonus. And I talked about it earlier on. This Brand Britain, I think, and I know it sounds a bit like a sort of Tony Blair slogan, doesn't it? Brand Britain, or Cool Britannia. But seriously, I think that is something that we can market so well in the future. And I think, you know, we mustn't This report, I know it's got it's bound to have a deal of pessimism in it because various deals will affect the industries badly. But we've got to then try and take this, create some positive ways forward, and that can be done. And so therefore, I don't want you going away from here today too depressed, because I do think we've still got some time. I do think some sort of interim deal will be arrived at, and I think that it'll be a few years down the road when we are completely out of the EU, but that's where I believe we are going, because I don't think we are going to reverse the decision. And so therefore I think we've got to work out the way forward, and I think it can be done. And like I said, again thank you very much for some very searching questions this afternoon. I'm glad I had Angela here with me, because you can see what is useful on the select committee is that especially with Angela there, we have a fairly good sort of sound voice of Labour, and so I've got no majority on the committee, and so therefore it's good if you've got a reasonable relationship. And also, if you've got a cross-party report, it's easier to get that, get some sort of traction behind it as well. So,
well, thank you for that, Neil. It was an extraordinary tour de force, as always.